Hey, welcome to the Rain and Morale podcast. So do you ever feel like screaming out in the office, on Zoom or outside the school gates, for the love of God, come on, really? Then if this is you and you're looking for an honest, fun and frank podcast on life and business, then sit back and listen to me, Rain and Morale. I'll be bringing great people on the show to talk, share and debate their life experiences and business challenges, keeping the show unpolished, but in a fun and unique British style, with sarcasm, tenacity, and maybe a few swear words or tears. This podcast keeps it real, honest, raw, and removes the bullshit in the only way I know how, through authenticity and getting shit done. Think of it less like the Housewives of New York or Towie with the lipo and drama, and more like the house lives of the real world. I hope you'll take something away to be better informed, laugh, smile, or maybe even finally getting the confidence to shout, come on really. So enjoy. Hi Minou, welcome to the Regeneration Morale podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I'm delighted to have Minou on the podcast today, a totally cool young entrepreneur who is the founder of the Green Sprint. Minou is currently based in Morocco, and I love the fact that Minou can kind of lift and shift and work wherever she likes. So remote worker, traveling around. So it's fantastic to see that, and obviously it must be an absolute pleasure for you as well. Minou has always worked in kind of creative innovation, facilitation, but her sweet spot now is very much about all things regenerative. So regenerative leadership, cultures, mindsets, etc. Oh, and she disappeared and came back again.
Yes, okay, I completely lost you there. So maybe you want to restart? That was like, I lost you after the first second.
Ah, right, okay. I'll hold on. I'll tell you what, I will. Hi, Minou. Welcome to the Rain and Morale podcast. How are you?
I'm good, Rona. Thank you for inviting me and having me over.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. So I'm delighted to introduce Minou, who's currently based in Morocco. She has the amazing advantage of being a remote worker, and as a nomad, she can kind of lift and shift where she wants to work. Minou's background has always been in creative innovation, facilitation. But her real sweet spot now is all things regenerative, hence why I've brought her into the podcast, and that could be around mindset, leadership, the way we do things within business. So welcome again, and we are going to dive straight into that topic. And I guess first I'd love to ask you, what's your kind of definition of kind of regenerative leadership and thought leadership?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for asking, because this is something that there's quite a lot of discussion around still, and it isn't completely clear for everyone what regeneration is. And sometimes you start talking about it and people just sort of glaze over, or they associate it with like agriculture only, or medicine in many cases, regenerative medicine and everything. But for me, regenerative leadership and regeneration is really about leaders who understand that to build a society or a future that is regenerative and just and inclusive and really just works for everyone and all entities, not just human beings, but all living entities and living systems, that to reach that we have to step over our ego, really start thinking in systems, start thinking long-term, generational, inclusive as well, that we have to take care, we have responsibility for all living systems, and that we really have to go beyond this business as usual mindset. And depending on in what kind of position you are or what you're doing, regenerative leadership can be anything. It's not only like C-level executives, but it can literally be anyone. It can be your mom, it can be the person who for example, cleans the office. It can be the CEO of the office. It can be anyone who lives on this planet and wants to take a more active role in building a regenerative and just future. And with regenerative, then I mean that all entities have the capability to fulfill their full potential. So we're not stifling the ability of these entities to come to that potential. And then with entities, can be anything. It can be creativity in a person. It can be a river that gets back to its full potential by us stopping with polluting it. It can also be a business that, instead of destructive, knows its place within the systems and helps other systems to also thrive.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Listen, for anyone who is hearing this, it'll be absolutely fine. But if anyone's watching on YouTube, we may get the occasional freeze and drop out with Minou being in Morocco. I've actually travelled to Morocco. I got married actually in Morocco in the Sahara Desert. So I know what the Wi-Fi is like out there, which is random when I got married in the Sahara Desert and I don't really like sand. But anyway, that's for another interview or another story. For another time. Thank you for that. And can I ask you, as someone kind of coming through into the world of work, what made you take this direction? Why are you going into this direction, and at such a young age?
It's been a journey, and like, I'm grateful that I'm in this direction right now, but looking back, I sort of wished, like, it's a bit pointless to wish that right now, but that I've went in that direction sooner. Because I've always wanted to go in a direction of impact, of social change, and ever since I was a little kid, I asked why about everything, and my parents thought, like, that's gonna stop at some point. It didn't. It just kept going, and I never accepted anything. I didn't accept that's just because that's how it's done. I didn't accept traditions. I didn't accept any of these things. Like, no, because that's how he's always done it. Like, didn't make any sense to me. I just wanted to know why. And when I was working within sustainability, because I wanted to create a better future, I was still thinking, like, why are we limiting ourselves to sustaining, even though that it's quite clear that a lot of what we're sustaining is currently not in a good state. It is not really helping us. It's not good for our mental health. It's not good for nature. It's not good for ourselves. It's really not good for anything besides, like, really rapid development over a couple of decades. But we've, in many countries, mostly word countries, like westernized industrial countries, we've seen enough of that. Like, it's enough. It doesn't make sense anymore. We have to find our way back to being in sync with nature and to really work in a regenerative way. But for a very long time, I didn't want to go in the direction of regeneration, just because of the silly reason that I was often stopped. And people are like, no, sustainability is hard enough, sustainability is enough. It's already difficult to get over the business as usual mindset. Now we have to just focus on green growth. And, like, I tried to make it work, but it didn't. For me, green growth and sustainability, even though sustainability is an important part of regeneration, it was just not going to cut it. It didn't have the positive angle that I was looking for. And regeneration really does. So for me, that just made sense. And the moment I was comfortable enough to start working on it and talking about it, everything clicked. I'm very happy with it.
I think it is. And I think when you go into it, you think about green, sustainable, ESG, sustainable development goals. And then actually, when you take a step back and you realise the very word and definition of sustainability is carrying on doing what you're doing, a lot of the time in consumerism, especially when it comes to business, which is obviously what you focus on, that in its very sense, when you take that layer away and you start to, like I've done, look at regenerative, what does that mean? I love the way that your friends and colleagues have gone, no, it's way too hard, and don't go there, you're just going to hit a load of brick walls. But that's what resonates, doesn't it? And I think that when you apply systems and interconnectivity to regenerative, actually suddenly it makes a lot more sense than this jarring, oh, it's just a carbon offset.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense, because I think that brick wall, that is what we have to run into, because how are we gonna really go through systems change and a societal change to the extent that is necessary to create a situation in which we can all thrive without hitting a brick wall. Like if we do it without that level of friction, we're not really changing anything. So it seems to be impossible without the wall. So I think the moment that we start feeling uncomfortable, that's when we have to power through.
And I guess as part of your business process, one of the things that we've all learnt in life is the massive value of complete and utter failure and how important that is. And whether it's times such as now where we have war, we've got climate, we've got other cost of living crises, it really dials up that drive for innovative thinking, doesn't it? And whilst it's frustrating to have those things to trigger that, it is a very exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. The moment there is a lot of tension on all the systems within society, within people, you see it in everything. You see indeed war, soil depletion, food insecurity, the cost of living, but also mental health problems, levels of suicide, loneliness, people having less sex. There's so much friction in all the things that are normally natural. There's tension everywhere. And I think that tension, people start feeling it and then they're ready to change. If that tension wasn't there, they wouldn't want to change, because changing is really hard. I love that quote by Naomi Klein that says, building livable communities isn't rocket science. It's much harder than that. It's about the hard, non-technical work of changing people's behavior. And that is so true. That is what really, really is the tricky part. And that's also why I focus so strongly, besides on regenerative leadership, really on human-centered design. So taking design thinking and their reuse in consideration at every point, because we can build products and solutions that are more sustainable or circular or anything. But if the people cannot work with it, if they don't accept it in their life, if they're not willing to start buying different products or engaging with products or with each other in a different way, then what are we doing? It's not gonna do anything. It's not gonna set in the ground.
Yeah, it's a bit like when I see the back of a lorry for the range and it says we have 65,000 products. I'm like, holy shit, what human could possibly need? Even a community need that, and that's just one business, one sort of set. And it's been quite funny because the last few days I've been watching the Hunger Games, and believe it or not, even for me who's 45, I've never seen it. I've just started watching it with my youngest daughter, and actually there's so many similarities in that film where it's we control what you do. You are part of that system, but we control that system and we take, but then the pushback, there's nothing there. And then the rebellion. And, the way my daughter's questioned that and connected it to life, I guess is a lot of those questions you did as a child and now replaying that back to businesses.
I love that. That is a really cool observation. She's absolutely right. Indeed. Now I'm thinking about it. There's a lot of intentional disconnectivity between people and stifling rebellion and just pretending that is the level you can get onto life. Wow, impressive.
Yeah.
Read the books because they're even better.
Are they? I'll definitely tell her to do that. So listen, let's dive into, let's say I'm a business and really haven't got a clue where to start. I've got a relatively small team. How do you first engage with businesses to then say, to shift from BAU, business as usual, to how we take you on the journey? What would you do?
So I always keep with the 3 simple steps, and then there's a lot in there, but I start with mindset, move on to strategy, and then to innovation. Because all the way at the beginning, a couple of years ago, I have a master's in creativity and innovation. So I rolled out of my studies. I was very excited about lateral thinking, about design thinking, and I wanted to create more sustainable products. And I was like, okay, love the design sprint method. We can apply that to sustainable product issues as well in the fast-moving consumer goods industry. Let's do it. Doesn't work, because if you start doing that with the old mindset, it's garbage in, garbage out, business as usual, mindset in, business as usual, product out, maybe in a sustainable jacket, And then you end up with these scary examples of what happened yesterday, that Boho, the fast fashion industry, hires one of the Kardashians to be the sustainability ambassador. Like, they clearly didn't go to the mindset process first because they don't understand.
My work here is done.
Yeah, absurd. I was like, that's the world backwards. So very, very important is focus for a very long time on mindset and make sure that everybody in the team actually sort of becomes this regenerative practitioner. And actually, I just dropped a quote on LinkedIn this morning, and I found it in this book this morning by Bill Reed from the Regeneration group. He's been like practicing being a regenerative practitioner or in his journey for around 27 years, and he explained the role of a regenerative practitioner or regenerative facilitator, which is what I do. Such a beautiful way. I'll just read the quote to you.
Please.
Our fundamental deliverable in a project is building the capacity and capability of participants to carry this regenerative way of being and thinking forward. My role is to help birth that. My role is also to deliver a successful project process. And this can be a very delicate and awkward dance until the participants catch the importance of self, group, and system actualization. And I think that is exactly what it is at the beginning of a process. Like, it's not a step-by-step process. There is not a clear framework that I would follow. It really depends on the group. But it is important that you work for such a long time with a group of people that they start understanding the 5 facets that are important for regenerative practices, and then you can move forward. Those 5 facets are framework thinking, so the ability to see the world in different frames, so you can use like design thinking, interior U and everything for that. Systems actualization, so what we're talking about at the beginning, like really enabling other systems to thrive. Self-actualization, like if you're not going to the journey, if you're not a regenerative person yourself, if you're fully linear career, stressful systems, you're never going to be able to build a regenerative community of business or be a healthy part of the system. Developmental facilitating is what I just described, and then living systems understanding. So understanding that you're a part of all these systems and how it's embedded. And also make sure that that is your compass in all decision making.
Yeah.
And getting to that point, that can be done in a lot of different ways. Like, I love riddles. I love going through riddles with people, interactive exercises, ecosystemic systems mapping, where you just like map out your life and see where regenerative action is required. Busting your assumptions, so many different ways actually to dig deep. So it's a very both individual and group process. It goes back and forward to it. And yeah, it's a bit strange that like my business is called the Green Sprint, because I think in this phase of the sprint towards a more green, it's so important. And the best way actually in this moment is like slowing down is the best way to speed up. So you have to slow down in the mindset process, slow down actually, I think, the strategy. So make sure you really have like your strategy in order. You come back to it like, okay, does this make sense? Is this not still built with a business as usual mindset? Like, what are the assumptions here that we built this on? Like, what is the way, what do we think success means? Like, what's the underlying meaning of success under this strategy? And then once you've worked through all that, when you come to innovation, that's where you can speed up, fail, test, implement, and continue to, but at the beginning, focus on mindset for quite a while.
It's such an important topic, because as somebody who's an ex-innovator and has worked in that space, actually in FMCG for sort of 4 or 5 years, that was always the hardest starting point, bearing in mind that you're designing and presenting to key stakeholders, C-suite individuals, all with very, very different mindsets, but also quite linear thinking in terms of, well, I'm head of supply chain, so that's my focus, and I'm actually, frankly, doesn't really matter. So I think when you look at the basic principles of innovation, mindset, and then interconnectedness, I think one of the most powerful things that I ever did was I basically followed a product from its birth, if you like, to the shelf, and actually spent a ridiculous amount of time through that supply chain. And I think that's really empowering when you take major individuals, senior individuals, on that journey as well. And I think that ability to mix the systems and understand them, I think, is where people then start to regenerative. So again, it's not new news, is it? Regenerative or systems. It's always been there. Nature's been doing it for millions of years, but it's just opening people's eyes again, rather than having this really kind of focused look at the world.
Yeah, we just had a sort of 250-year error. But before that, like, we've been always regenerative. Indeed, it's nothing like, after people say it's a new concept, it's like, it's a new concept in a linear, destructive, capitalistic world that we have created. But that world hasn't been around for so long. It's like literally blinking your eyes if you put it in like the space of the actual world. And people just don't understand it. It's like, that is often a very tricky part where, like, but this is how it's supposed to be. This is how the world is. Like, no, this is how we designed it to be, and it is doing what we designed it to do. It's doing what we intended it to do. Is maximizing profit and churning out as many products as possible. But that's not what it per se has to do. Like, it's a system, so we can also redesign it. And I think getting this message across to as many people as possible in an accessible way, because that is frankly what is bothering me a little bit with the regenerative space. It's a bit over complex, and a bit inaccessible, and very academic. And like, okay, I understand that we want to be severe and precise and like really uncover like what regeneration actually means and what it can do. But I think we also have to do that in a way that is accessible, and that we can get other people on board, instead of doing it perfectly straight away, which also think
no such thing. Yeah, exactly. It's like when people go, well, what do you mean by that? It's just a diversion technique. We as humans hate change, and we don't like new buzzwords. But as you say, strip it all back. It's always been there. It's just, and let's be honest, this is always, especially in the area that you're working in, if you're talking business, any business, it's always going to come down to commerciality and the shareholders and stakeholders of that business.
Yeah, absolutely. We just have to broaden our perspective of what that means, what like value means, what shareholder means, what stakeholder means. Yeah, exactly.
Do you think we've got a finite amount of time? Do you think that there's a lot of companies that will just carry on business as usual? They're just thinking, well, I've got 5 years left or 10 years to retire, kicking the can down the road. How long do you think we've got before people are going to have to capitalize, put the value on nature and bring it into the business? Or do you have hope for that? Or do you just think the 1% will always be the 1% and nothing's going to change?
I find this this is a hard question.
Sorry.
No, it's a good question. The problem with it is that there will always be ignorance and selfishness in people. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that, what's happening in Pakistan right now is a great example, is the people who added the most to this destruction of our ecosystem and climate change aren't the people who are going to suffer it the first. So whilst everyone in Pakistan and in other places around the world is already really, really, really hard and devastating, like living to these consequences, I'm going to go back to the Kardashians. The sustainability ambassador of a fast fashion brand is up high and dry and exceeded her waste limit, her water limit on her property with 459,000 liters. Like, if that is our sustainability fashion if that's a sustainability ambassador for a fashion brand, I think we have still a very, very, very long way to go. And you see the same with like billionaires that are talking about sustainability and everything, flying around in private jets. And to be honest, it's going to take a really long time for them to feel it because they have the resources to not feel it. Like,
Yes.
even if everything goes to shit, they just buy a high and dry piece of land somewhere, build a property and make sure they're comfortable there. If that is going to change anytime soon, I don't know. And that's also why I really do not want to focus or put my priorities on trying to change the mindset of these people. I really think it has to come from SMEs, from grassroots, from communities, from like new policymakers, all of that. And those people, they probably can sustain for 100,000s of years. I mean, I see the Matrix. The whole world is completely to shit, and still people find a place to like make it work somewhere in an alternative universe or anything. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird analogy, but I think there will always be people that keep destructing, even though that everybody else isn't. But I don't think that matters. It's annoying, yes. It's not what our focus should be on.
I tend to agree, and I think I was talking to somebody this morning, and there was a young group of people who have kind of studied in sustainability and engineering and have come out with this amazing piece of kit. And it's so amazing to see all of those new SMEs and startups coming through now to take on the business as usual. And I think we're just going to have an uncomfortable 50 years. I just hope that within that 50 years, I mean, I'll probably be dead if I see 95, great. But if not, it does give me hope. I do have hope. How do you deal with, or have kind of this whole fatigue and maybe feeling like, this hitting this brick wall constantly, rather than I'm in a sales team and I've hit my targets every month and I'm flying high, and yes, of course they have their bad moments. How do you deal with it if you do get those feelings?
You mean like climate anxiety, or the feeling that I want to shake the world because not enough people seem to get what we're facing?
I think probably a little bit of both, but climate anxiety.
Climate anxiety is a hard one. I think for me, how I deal with that, and that is probably not the most regenerative way of dealing with it, but it's the way that I am dealing with it right now, is I do my best to learn and as best as possible and unlearn as much as possible to be like the regenerative practitioner that I need to be to help others and help other businesses. And the moment that I can't deal with it anymore, or it gets to me, I dive in the world of fiction novels.
Yes.
I read a lot of books. Yeah.
Amazing.
That helps, getting away from the screen, reading books. Just like yesterday, after a long day of working, I just spent 1.5 hours watching the sunset and reading Dracula, which has nothing to do with those worlds. It's like written 100 years ago. It's quite dark, but I love it. That's my...
I don't know, I think it's probably got a lot to do with the real world, actually.
In a way, yeah. But I think there are a couple of ways that you go about it. Like you could go through your climate anxiety, your eco anxiety, and like find a way to deal with it. Or like Rob Harrison Plasto from the Pathfinders Collective says beautiful, like how to be happy at the end of the universe or at the end of the world, something framed like that. Which I think is a really, really good question. And probably to do that, you need a lot of like sharing moments and long talks with other people. And that's why I do love traveling. Because I can talk about this with people from all over the world, and everybody is going about it in a different way. And that is very helpful as well. On the other end, it's also painful. Like, for example, like I train everywhere. So I went to Morocco by train and by foot, and I'm going back by train as well, and sharing car options and all those kind of things. But then there are a lot of people around me that just fly everywhere. Like there's really good example of I'm going all the way back home to the Netherlands in 2 weeks by train. That's gonna take me 4 days, 34 hours of sitting in a train or in a bus, and a lot of money because it's a lot more expensive than flying, unfortunately, still something we should work on as well. But I love it. I use these 34 hours to read all the books of regeneration that I've come across in the last couple of weeks and I haven't read yet. Just gotta like process and look out of the window and do my thing. But there was this girl that I was living with for a while, in a co-living, and she is going to fly to Kenya via Ireland because that was the cheapest.
Oh, yeah.
Ow. Those moments are hard, and I tend to get into a lot of conversations about this. And I've learned to not then start preaching, but start listing all the benefits of going by train. It's like, it's really cool, and then you can see all other cities over the way. You can like work and like, I don't know, try different food in different countries because you're traveling. Then you really see how the world is changing around you. It's not as like, okay, get in a plane, be somewhere else. Like you don't see the transition, you don't understand the complexity of the world. So you always try to give it that positive twist.
Yeah.
It's hard. Like sometimes I just want to like shake people, but that's not helpful.
No. And I'm a bit like you. I think I kind of, there's no point preaching, but it's great to share different viewpoints. And I'm very much, I just read in my head, I kind of go, I feel like I'm on the right side of the topic rather than denying it. And secondly, for me, it's, like you say, living and breathing it where best you can. I did a post recently about being a planetary citizen, and a lady gave some really great feedback about, well, what if you're living in a flat or you're living in India? And I went, yeah, all of these things are relevant, but people like me who have been fortunate to be born in a developed country, and as you said, are responsible for most of the issues now facing, developing countries. It is my duty to do more. So I think trying to live and breathe by it, feeling like I'm on the right side of the argument, but also knowing that I'm not perfect. And, if anything that I'm doing is harmful, absolutely let me know, shout out. And that's the way I kind of get it in my head. So if someone wants to say, well, you've not got a train or you've flown, or why are you buying that material and not that material? I go, well, if you can prove that it's more damaging to people or planet, great, I'll stop. If it isn't, what's your problem?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of how if it gets ever argumentative, because sometimes it can get quite heated.
And I think it also have to be about, like, it has to be a sustainable way as well. Like you can now go off the grid, live fully circular, have no, like, live zero waste, go vegan, plant your own food and everything. But like, how long are you going to be able to keep that up? Like I always say to people as well who eat like a lot of meat, if you can keep up being a flexitarian for 80 years and you can keep up being a vegan for a year, like please be a flexitarian, because that's a lot more helpful then. You don't have to be perfect. And to everyone who always has to be like, yeah, but because you said like what you do if like you live in a flat in India, or the whole like we don't have to change because like developing countries still have to grow, develop further. To all of those, I would say no, just no. I'm not even like going to dive into this discussion. Everybody understands when we're talking about sustainable behavior change and degrowth. We're talking about sustainable behavior change and degrowth for the countries that have impacted the most, that created the most negative impact, and where we need sustainable behavior change. Nobody is going to ask a developing country like India. Jason Hickel said that perfectly in the green growth degrowth debate last week. Nobody is going to tell those countries stop developing until you meet like the whole of the donut, until you can sustain all the basic human rights for people. Absolutely not. It's about the developing countries keep developing till a certain level, and the overdeveloped countries that go in deeper, the overdeveloped countries that change their behavior. And I find this discussion the pointing fingers so fascinating sometimes. It's like, I don't even know how someone's brains goes there. It's like, are you deliberately trying to not understand that nobody's going to ask that from developing countries?
Yeah.
I don't know, the absurdity sometimes.
I know. And I think, and also what we should also be doing is actually, as those developing countries grow, be giving those the tools and materials. There's some great alternatives now, some recently new developments, whether that be packaging, whether that be building cement alternatives, so they can develop. But it's not our fault. It is our fault, but we were developing materials through innovations and from 50, 100 years ago. Now we've learnt the lessons. We can then help those developing countries build and grow infrastructure, healthcare, education using our knowledge and science.
And the other way around as well, because I wouldn't say it was a one-way street. It's also, we can still learn a lot from like the indigenous communities and cultures that we have been overrunning for so long. And the cultures that did manage to actually keep a collective approach to life and not went fully individual, which causes quite a lot of problems as well. So it really is like a two-way street here, where I think we have to start embracing open innovation and stop being so protective and just like really understand, okay, this is a global problem. If you zoom out, that like, this is a cliche, but like there's no borders if you zoom out and take a picture of the Earth from space. And I really think that is how we have to approach and tackle sustainability and regeneration as well. Like stop being so pointy fingers and protective, and just understand, okay, this is a global issue, and we are gonna try our best, like living systems understanding and systems actualizing, try our best to enable all these systems to collaborate and create this future in which we can live. Because if we keep hogging and like putting so much emphasis on these borders and on you, me, and win lose, now we're never going to get there.
Yeah. Well, listen, that sounds like a perfect place to start. What's hugely exciting is that there are young people out there like yourselves doing what you're doing. What's key that you've talked about today is that continuous education, listening, learning, looking at opposing opinions, because you have to look at the opposite side. I always say to my kids, there's not two sides to a story, there's 50 or 100. So I think it's hugely exciting to have you in this space. Look, have a safe trip back on that train, back to the Netherlands. And listen, it's obvious for a lot of people, not everyone can take 5 days to travel back. Time is precious. But like you said, it's about trying to do what you can do, educating. You're not perfect, but actually if everyone made those incremental shifts as a general population, there'd be a huge shift in consumer behavior, which would just be incredible. Thank you so much, Minou. It's just been incredible to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you as well. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. Take care and safe travels.
Thank you.
So that's it. You've made it. The show's over. Thank you for being with us. I hope you've been able to take something away, maybe solve a problem, or just know you're not alone. Here's hoping it made you smile with a few laughs along the way. Please feel free to find me on all social media channels, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search the Road and Morale podcast. Have an awesome day and see you next time.